Oh, hello. Hello. Is it on? Sounds a little soft. Hello. Hello. Maybe a bit. Oh, much better. Okay. All right. People are like, yeah, yeah. Hi, everybody. Hello. Oh my gosh. Hey. Um, so good to see you. Hi, everybody online. You're seeing a very weird angle of me. Sometimes I want to like, hello. Um, it's such a pleasure to welcome you all here. It's so exciting always to have our authors, but we always love the authors that come back to us. So, before we get started, just want to flag that bathrooms are upstairs for anybody who's never been here before, past the registers. We have books for sale upstairs. Everybody should have gotten a book when they came in. If you did not already get your book, you can do that now. You can do that after the event, whatever works for you. If you would like an extra book, you can get one upstairs at the end of the event. If you could go ahead and silence your phones right now, I would be most appreciative. Uh, Hello, virtual audience. I already greeted you, but I always like to remind myself to do that. And then, just so you know, we will have a signing line afterward with Rosie if you want your book personalized. Um, Ava will not be signing at the end of the event, but all of the books that we have in stock for her here are already signed. So you won't be missing out that way. Just want to flag a couple upcoming events that we have that may interest you. La-di-da. Okay, so in April, on April 10th, we have Romance is Resistance panel with a few. Woo! Yes, yes, yes. Very exciting. It'll feature Joanna Lowell, Amelie Howard, and Elizabeth Everett, all historical romance authors, talking about the ways in which romance is resistance. We have a in-person happy hour where Emily Henry will not be, but you can come with other people to celebrate the release of her. But I have to lead with that. Have to lead with that. It's called A Great Big Beautiful Happy Hour, and that'll be on April 22nd. We have a virtual event with Nalini Singh for the release of her next Guild Hunter book, and that's on May 5th. And then I'll stop in May. We have Rachel Lynn Solomon here for What Happens in Amsterdam, and she will be here in the store. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful authors for today. But before I do, I just want to say fan service was so much fun. I last time Rosie was here, I went on a whole spiel about how in 2020 the roommate was like my entire personality. I see people shaking their heads. You understand that feeling. And so I just really appreciate that she's just continued to take risks, which to me is always something that I'm going to be here for and on the right for. So can't wait for you all to read it. Whoever has already read it, you're lucky. But everybody else will join you in that luck today. I'll start with Ava Wilder, who is the author of How to Fake It in Hollywood and Will They or Won't They, and something that's coming out soon. So if you haven't already seen, go check her socials. She lives in Northern Virginia with her husband and her toothless cat, who I have confirmed is indeed toothless. Rosie Danan writes steamy, big-hearted books about the trials and triumphs of modern love. When not writing, she enjoys jogging slowly to fast music, relatable, petting other people's dogs, and competing against herself in rounds of chopped using the miscellaneous ingredients occupying her fridge. As an American expat who was living in London, Rosie regularly found herself borrowing slang that doesn't belong to her. However, we are very happy to have her here. So please join me in welcoming Rosie and Ava. You have a preference? Oh no. I guess I did because I so you did. You were ready. Hi, people. And people here also.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm so excited to be here with Rosie. Do you want to just start by giving a little elevator pitch of fan service for people who haven't read it yet?
Yes. Hello? Yes, you can hear me? Okay, great. So fan service is like a wild idea that I didn't think would be a book, but I thought maybe it would be like a joke that I told in bars. Basically it is about a actor who used to be famous, for playing a werewolf on a CW-like supernatural detective show. And he has never really let go of this role. And so what happens is he starts to turn into a werewolf in real life. And no one believes him because they're like, that's the character you played. Like, this is a desperate bid for attention. You should see a therapist. Like, we're not going to help you, though. And so he does what any of us would do. He Googles werewolves help. And he finds a internet archive run by fans for his former show. And he looks and he's like, there's a moderator of this archive, and they are answering all kinds of questions about werewolf anatomy, like what is mpreg and self-lubricating buttholes. And if you're like, what? Don't worry, because he's also confused. But he's like, you know what? This person seems like an expert. So I'm going to email them and see if they will help me with this problem. On the other side of the computer screen is our heroine, Alex, who was a huge fan of Devin's supernatural detective show. And she was the moderator of the archive. So she gets this email from someone that's like, hi, this is actor Devin Ashwood, and I'm turning into a werewolf. And she's like, one of my fandom friends is playing a prank on me, as you would assume. So she goes to meet up with him and gets basically ensnarled in a very tricky problem of becoming a werewolf against your will. And she, after kind of bargaining, she helps him figure out how to deal with this werewolf problem. That is the book. Wasn't quite it was a really long elevator. It was the Empire State Building elevator.
Am I speaking? Okay.
Well, I know it's hard.
So I remember we first met about 2 years ago, and I don't know what stage you were in writing this, but I was like, oh, what are you working on? And you told me about this book, and I was like, that is amazing. So I'm so excited.
Probably like the joking about it and not writing it stage.
You seem serious.
Okay,
I was ready to read it, and now so I'm so excited to be here with you today talking about it. So how did we get here?
How did we make it?
How do we get here?
This book has been such a journey. Again, I think because the part that I knew, right, the joke in my head was like, he's turning into the character he played on TV. No one believes him. But I actually did not have a great grasp on who would be the love interest, like who would be the person that would complete this werewolf. And I went through some iterations there, and they all are really silly. The first was that she was going to be the curator of a werewolf museum. And that sounds a little funny, but there is a Salem Witch Museum. And so werewolf lore goes back across time and cultures. Yeah. I'm like justifying it to myself, basically. So anyway, that ended up evolving. And the other thing that was absolutely bananas that was a part of this journey is that I've told you this. The ending it's no longer, please believe it, it got a lot better. It was a werewolf musical.
I'm so sad. Like, if you want to send me that ending
through the werewolf musical.
If you want to send me that ending, my inbox is open.
So dead ass. Like, I sent it to my first like alpha reader, and yeah, very gently, I think she was like, is this right for the story? But I think what was wonderful was to actually find Alex's character and to ground her in fandom for the show, which was my third try, because that felt really personal and like something I love being a part of fandoms. I love getting excited about stuff, and to get to take like lived experiences, falling in love with celebrities, and kind of weave that in. But also, it turns out I had a lot of thoughts about parasocial relationships and potentially the dangers of them. So yeah, I think that really hopefully brought a deeper and again more grounded sense to the book, which on the one hand is so silly and like whimsical, but I think fandom is something that a lot of us have experienced, even if you've never been into a CW like supernatural television program. You have probably been like a fan of a band or a sports team or something, and you know what it's like to just kind of like lose yourself in enthusiasm for something. And I think that's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and they really like. I can't imagine him with anyone else. So that you really,
That's the goal.
you really brought it home. So obviously, this is like a love letter to fandom, and especially like the things that we're fans of at like a very formative and difficult age. So what were those shows for you? I mean, there's a lot of references in here,
I mean,
but
I'm gonna ask you to put your hair back so people can see your Buffy the Vampire Slayer. OG. She did not buy this at a vintage shop.
no, I've owned this since the year 2003.
A real one. So that honestly is probably like my most formative lore. I have all the DVD box sets to this day. We were talking about this. And thank God, because like what if the streaming people try to take it from me? So I think it's again things that find you like in your formative years. I was talking about this with Alexis Daria last night. Um, they create this nostalgia that stays with you because it's not just about like remembering the program, but it's remembering like how you felt and where you were at that stage of your life. And I remember like having sleepovers with my friends to watch Buffy and like how passionate I still am about like Spike being her superior love interest. You guys, I've had so many fights about this. Like people are out here defending Angel to me and like thank you. You're on the right side of history.
We can talk about this later. I'm not
Ava!
I'm not Team Angel.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
I'm part of the
Are you Team
Faith.
Riley?
No, I'm the part of the Faith contingent.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
acceptable. That's acceptable. The blackout of Team Riley. I was like,
sorry, no.
I have to
That
go.
would be so funny if I was like springing this.
Yeah,
right
I was like,
now.
I thought I knew
We have
you.
to end this event.
I know. But I think since then, you know, part of fandom I think is watching canon and like falling in love with canon first and then finding fandom. But as an adult, I find that I have found fandoms first and then sometimes like I will read fanfic of anything. So like I can have no and I often don't have any idea like who these people are. Like I have never watched like Merlin. But if you're sending me like a Merlin fic, like yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll use context clues. And I think that's like a really cool way because often canon is inferior to like the fan created universe that I have found to be so much, I don't know, first of all, obviously more diverse and also richer and like more thoughtfully explored. A thesis of this book is definitely that like there is far too many misogynistic showrunners that like have ruined their own programs because they held so tightly to like patriarchal ideas. So read more about that in fan service. My
Well, speaking of the canon, I was so impressed with the lore that you came up with for this, both the amount of it and also the amount that it impacted the story. And I have also had the experience of writing a book about a supernatural show and being like, oh, I actually have to know what happened on this show. Why did I do this?
yeah.
So I'm sort of interested to know because I thought you did such a great job, sort of what that experience, what the process was of creating this fake show.
Okay, I'll answer your question, but I just want to plug Ava's books because they are, I feel like, a really good fit for anyone that loves fan service because Ava writes celebrity romances, but that are also like so soapy and dramatic and angsty, but also like really grounded in like the full picture of fame, if you will. Like, how does it wreck you as well as do nice things for you. And the book that she's not mentioning the title of, will they or won't they, is a personal favorite. So if you don't have it, it's on the way out.
That's very nice.
Okay, now I'll answer your question, which is how did I make up lore for the show?
And did you regret all your decisions in the process?
I mean, did I regret all my decisions? Yes. the thing that I got to do with this is I got to make fun of lovingly a lot of those paranormal shows that existed in the 90s and early aughts. And so I feel like a lot of things that I made up as lore for the show, it would be like, well, what is like the most ridiculous thing that was happening on like MTV at the time? Or like, is there like, can I imagine Joss Whedon like ruining something? How would he do that? Like for example, there's trials, like werewolf trials are like a part of the lore of the Arcane Files, which is the show. And I'm like, well, they would torture like the poor hero because that showrunners of that era like wanted to punish their characters in ways that did not make a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I think like I wanted it all to feel really tongue in cheek and familiar in the way of something that could have existed as a peer to those shows that like because there's it's such a moment in time. I feel like we're not getting that kind of, maybe we will bring it back because did you guys hear that they're going to bring back Buffy in celebration of my book? No. But like I am happy, and that Taylor Lautner is going to like play a werewolf hunter. Google it, it's happening.
Wow, I need a minute to process that. Some bombshells on this stage right now. So yeah, I mean, I think you did such a great job. It's clear that you have so much like affection and knowledge for all these shows. Do you have like a favorite kind of like reference, or like, I don't want to call them Easter eggs because I like to call them Hanukkah guilt personally because I don't understand the concept of Easter eggs. Do you have a favorite guilt moment from
There is
this?
one. So I and actually owe, I know that she's watching the live stream and like look dead onto camera. I owe this Easter egg to Ruby Barrett, who actually watched the full Supernatural television program many times through, which I cannot say the same. I think I've seen like 5 episodes. But sometimes when I was working on this book, I would be like, is there something funny that I can put in that makes fun of Supernatural? And she was like, oh, you should do that. There's an episode through the POV of the car, because that is like a very famous Supernatural episode. And so there's a joke that is very like kind of off center that's like, oh, the episode where we did it through the POV of his motorcycle. So that is a nod to that specific Supernatural episode, which you will only appreciate if you have seen it. Which I haven't. Thank you, Ruby.
Also, while we're crediting people, Rachel Renya Katz came up with Hanukkah guilt, so I cannot take credit for that.
Look
either.
at us making sure that people get there.
You know, it's going to be online, so we got to make sure. So your first 2 books were just sort of straightforward contemporary romances, and now you've made this pivot to they're paranormal, but they're like grounded paranormal. They're like in our world where magic exists. So what was it like making that pivot?
I mean, it was not like an intentional branding move. I think if you hold all my books up together, you can be like, what happened here? And it's an artist following the whims of her fancy. Like I am always trying to entertain myself. And I think that's partially because it's like that's the only person that you can guarantee will or won't like your book. So write for an audience of one. And I think, you know, when I started my first move into speculative elements, so like any magical elements in our world, with my last book, Do Your Worst, it was like the thick of the pandemic, right? And I wanted to escape our world, and like a normal romance novel, a contemporary, was not enough. Like I needed it to be more escapist. So I was like, let's add some magic. And I think I think there is something really intriguing as a writer to think about like what kind of love story would only happen if the guy is a werewolf. Like, and in again, in a very hopefully realistic way, like if Devin Ashwood, the actor here, was not punished by the narrative in losing complete control of his physical form, Alex would never fall in love with him. Like he's a jerk and he's really immature. He was a child actor. And he has to go on like a whole growth journey that is forced out of him physically, like with these transformations, because what I thought was so interesting, like what drew me to like werewolves, because I think there's probably infinite ways into werewolves, is
That's what fan fiction is there
I
for.
know, right? Is that it is like a complete loss of control. Like, so for anyone who knows what it's like to not want to show their full self, who feels like anxious about not being what people want them to be, if you were losing control and you had just, and he gets amnesia when he loses control, and so that's just like the most terrifying thing that I can imagine, is like a child actor who is raised to believe that you are only as good as you can make other people feel, like you are only as good as what they want to project onto you, and now you cannot control that at all. It would force you to confront things. So it's like a very intense form of therapy, I guess. So yeah, I just liked like this love story could only exist if he's a werewolf. If they met as humans, she'd be like, "You suck."
Well, I loved his characterization and his arc so much because first of all, I love just like an imperfect man, like but not, not too imperfect, but in a way where they feel like they're like a real person. And his arc like really drives the narrative of this book so beautifully. And I think you do such a like an empathetic job of showing, because I feel like especially celebrity characters probably are going to be like way messier than the average person just because they're like not living in the real world.
They're not normal.
They're not normal, yeah. And so I just like I thought his characterization was so good, and I really loved him so much, which is hard to do. um and I also really loved the dynamic between them of like meeting your childhood crush and being like, oh, this guy is like kind of a train wreck. And then the power dynamic kind of gets flipped where like he needs her help. And so like, and I think that's very common in celebrity romance, is like there's the interrogation of this power dynamic and you sort of like turn it on its head. So talk to me about just sort of writing your way through that and kind of like exploring the way that they relate to each other in that way.
Yeah, I think that's like what you're saying. I totally agree. It's hard to write a normal person, like a non-celebrity, falling in love with a celebrity and almost having it be like believable, in the sense, especially because if it's like Alex, where she had a crush on him when she was 17, right? So like how weird is that going to be to then fall in love with him when she's 34? Um and I think, to your point, like the only thing that makes that possible is for them to have the power dynamic switched where he needs her help. And I guess she gets to see him be really vulnerable. I think that's the thing, like with celebrities, if you're only consuming what they, for the most part, control the narrative to release, you're not necessarily seeing the kind of vulnerability that I think allows you to fall in love with someone. Um, and again, I think the reason Devin has not been like very successful in other relationships is he would never willingly show people that kind of vulnerability. So, having it kind of ripped out of him. But I think I am totally, uh, obviously interested in this idea of, could you go from loving the idea of a person to loving the actual person, and find that that could be better? Because when you fall in love with the idea of someone, it is like you can make that whatever you want. Like that's a very powerful, in your own mind, thing, that you are molding them to basically be whatever you need, fictionally, basically. Um, so it's a hard thing for a real person to live up to. And I think Devin like feels that weight and has insecurity around that. Like, why would you ever be in love with a flawed person slash werewolf, when you could be in love with this idea that you created to be perfect for you?
No, I mean, I think you did such an amazing job
We
with
pulled it
that. You pulled it off. Um, so speaking of their connection, I think that you are like one of the greatest out there in terms of writing sex scenes.
Oh boy.
And actually, when I when I was writing my first book, I was like, I've never written a sex scene before, so I need to like study up these sex scenes that I think are like do a really good job. And The Roommate was one of the books that I looked at, was like a sacred text for me.
Oh my gosh.
So because I think like I always love to talk to other authors about sex scenes because they are on a craft level, like you really have to take it very seriously and you have to think a lot about every single thing that goes into it.
Yeah.
And this book has a lot of like really fun and interesting sex scenes, which is also important. Like you want to kind of keep it interesting. So how do you go about that?
So first of all, I have to say, like, Ava showed me the questions before we had this discussion, and it was so hard for me to not say, like, can you take that sex scene question off? No.
Okay.
But the reason that I didn't is because I had to be like, get over yourself. Like, you do care about this from a craft perspective, and everything you're saying, like, it's not easy. And I think, like, so I'm making myself talk about it, even though I'm so embarrassed. But yeah, I think like a couple of things that are important to me about it, and I think I might have even said this the last time I was here. Like I really, and similar to what the way I try to think about like a love story that could only happen under this very specific set of circumstances, like a sex scene that could only happen for these people at this moment in time. So that it doesn't, I'm really not interested in sex scenes that feel like I've read it before, basically. Like I want it to feel as real for these characters as possible. And that's why it's fun to write werewolf stuff, because if I was here last time, I feel like I probably did talk about this. I really wanted to write the scene where somebody is like, I am gonna transform into a monster and you gotta tie me to a chair for safety, and then kissing probably. And I tried to do it in Do Your Worst, my last book, and my editor was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, good try, but like, we're cutting this. It is ludicrous. And she was right. But for this book, I made it work, and she let me keep it in. But yeah, I think that is really fun. Because like werewolf stories have been told in so many different variations, I feel like there's fun stuff to like riff off of. So there's like a nod to Little Red Riding Hood, because like how could you not? Yeah, so I think, but I will say like my editor wanted like an extra sex scene in this book at the end of this book, and I just was like, I'm not feeling it. Like I have said all I need to say about their sex life. Like let's close the door and let them like do whatever they need to. And that's sort of like the first time that I felt like that, but I feel like that's another part of my process that I'm like, I feel like I have like so much that I'm interested in exploring, and then when I use that up, I'm just like not gonna do it anymore. So I hope that's helpful.
And I mean, I think it really comes through, because I agree that I think the mark of a good sex scene is that it feels incredibly specific to those characters and in that moment. And it's not easy to do that.
And I love a slow burn. This is definitely a slow burn. And I think I think all my work not, I can't make promises, I guess, but like I feel like that works best for me as an author too.
So looking sort of at your career as a whole, this is your 4th book. Thinking about the version of yourself that was writing The Roommate, if you could say something to her now, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. We were talking about this at dinner, like sweet summer child. I think I would say, even though it's a bittersweet thing, like it will not always feel like this. Like writing The Roommate was pure joy. I didn't think I was going to publish it. So I was just writing to see if I could write a book. And I remember being like, I can't believe that authors are complaining that writing is hard. Like I sit down and I feel wonderful. And so I wish I could say that to myself. One, so I would be able to like appreciate it a little bit more, like all the wonderful parts of that creation process, but also so that like when it would feel bad inevitably later, I would know that like that feeling is also not forever. Like we were talking about this, like we have had dark moments, as anyone does, I think, professionally or as an artist. But to like find ways back to joy. Like when I was plotting this book, I got a new notebook and I wrote on the cover joyful exploration. And I think I fulfilled that promise to myself. Like it is brings me so much joy. It is very exploratory. Like it is trying stuff, some of which I maybe pulled off like 90%, but like I'm happy with that because it pushed me a lot as a artist.
I mean, it is very inspiring to see you like clearly just like chasing your joy and being like, I'm gonna do this kind of out there idea, even though it's scary, and actually like do an amazing job and pull it off. And it's like, all right, what's next? Like
The
that's
nicest thing has been that like a couple of people have said to me like this book feels like it was written specifically for me. And like that's so it's such a weird book. And it was written specifically for me. So if somebody says that, I'm like, Anne Shirley, kindred spirit, like I love that. And that like, what a honor to have someone feel like that about something that you made. So I will keep making weird books for weird people.
good. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is the thing about art is that like the more specific you get, even if it's like no one in the world could possibly relate to this the way that I do, like there are people who are going to be like, this is my book. And like, it's so special to me. So yeah, it's just, it's great. So speaking of your career, thinking of these 4 books that are like fairly different, do you think there are any kind of like common themes or like through lines or like what makes something a Rosie Danan book?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one thing is like sort of non-traditional love interest. So my first love interest in The Roommate is a porn star. Spoiler alert. Then I did a hot rabbi.
Yes.
I'm not gonna say anything else. And then I did. Oh, I feel bad because I did this. Like Clark is like more normal, but he's sad to the depths of few men.
Yes.
That's what makes him special. And then obviously Devin is a child actor turned werewolf.
That's
So
werewolf.
yeah, I think like I'm interested in that. I think clearly. I think there's also like and then there's like some obvious tropes that I gravitate towards like opposites attract. Like I really want it to be 2 people who on paper it makes no sense, which again is why I think all my books sound like jokes in the beginning. And then I'm trying to think if there's like I think it is people who think and this is I think something a lot of romance novelists explore and we all do it with like our own flavor but somebody that thinks that they are unlovable and then somebody who is like determined to love the crap out of them and yes I love that moment where it's like you fool love came for you what now.
Yeah, that's what we're all reading for. So I think I have time for one more question before we go to the audience.
Okay.
So here's a giant question. And we may have actually covered this already, but what was the most fun part of writing this book for you, and what was the most challenging part?
I'm going to do the challenging one first and hope that the fun one, a lot of it was fun. So that's like why it's harder to prioritize, honestly. The challenging part, I mean, I did mention that it took me a while to like find the way to the right story. The other thing is like, man, I jumped in with both feet to writing speculative, which requires world building with like no like understanding of how that works. So one of the things I figured out that I think helps this book tremendously is there's interstitials. Like even if you just like flip through your book, you'll see there's excerpts from the archive. And that allowed me to explain the fictional show and basically like tell you the lore of him becoming a werewolf and like how it was working, which was really helpful because for a certain number of drafts, I won't say how many, I didn't have that kind of like easy reference. And so like my editor kept asking me like, what does he look like in the partial shift? Like what's happening there? And I'm like, I cannot explain it any more clearly. So yeah, I think from a breaking the format and writing the excerpts was really helpful and hopefully also fun. And then the most joyful part of it, what is my favorite scene? I mean, I honestly there's the early I mentioned, like Devin, the hero, goes on this journey where he goes from being like a dirtbag himbo to like a redeemable, hopefully, like man that you think deserves love. But I really liked writing him being kind of like a dirtbag himbo. Like he has some mean kind of thoughts that I think are really funny, where it's like I would never be able to say that as myself, but I got to write it as like him saying it. Like he says you like it he says to the heroine, I hope please don't hate him. I have so much affection. I love him. He's my favorite, I think. He says like you look like a rag doll from Hot Topic at one point to her. And like that's just like delightful to
But he
me.
meant it in a nice way.
Yeah, he meant it lovingly as like constructive criticism. But yeah, I think that was really fun.
Yeah, no, his POV was so much fun. Okay, I guess it's time for questions.
And we have a fun incentive. I'm like, can I do this? Am I allowed? Ava has a book coming out in October. So most people will have to wait for the next Ava Wilder book. But someone here is going to get to read an advanced copy. Do you want to give us a little log line for it?
Man, okay, I haven't had to do
You're like, I'm not ready for this.
It's also a celebrity romance. It's a celebrity normie romance about a singer-songwriter who has kind of like a troubled history. She's retreated from the spotlight. She's living in a small town and she falls in love with her himbo contractor.
Sounds so good.
Yeah.
So maybe the first question will, oh my gosh, I made so much eye contact with you. Okay, it's you. You are gonna get a either email or mailing address, whatever you're comfortable with.
I'm gonna go over to you and get your email after this.
Okay.
All right, I've seen transitions writing like more fantasy.
Thank you for saying that.
And do your words with wonderful. I'm so excited about this. Do you think that's gonna be something you're gonna continue on in future books?
The question is, are you going to continue writing fantasy in future books?
Thank you. Yes, I can confirm that there will be at least one more book in the Rosie Danan writes speculative elements. The reason I say it that way is like I do think these are almost contemporary and it's just like one thing is twisted. So recommend them to your contemporary reading friends. But yes, I can give a little something away. I'm going to. I'm going to be in my vampire era next, which feels, we had to go there. I had to build my way up to have the strength to tell that story. So Buffy, help me.
I can't wait.
Yes. What's the musical original ending inspired by the musical episode of Buffy? Somehow get that ending.
Was the musical episode inspired by the musical episode of Buffy? And is that ending ever going to be available to everyone who wants to read it, which is everybody?
So I'm sure like subconsciously, not well, self-consciously too. It probably was on some level. It really directly was inspired by the Dracula musical in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, right? With the puppets. It was like that vein. So like less serious, if you can imagine it, than the Buffy musical. Can people read it? I'm gonna say probably never because it has. I haven't gone back and look at it. I promise to go back and look at it and see how bad it is. But I think it's probably really bad. Because I just remember thinking like this is some good shit. This is poignant. And it's like there's no way. There's just no way that
it's better than you think it is.
Maybe. Yes.
I'm gonna write fan fiction of what I
of
think
the werewolf musical.
It was like
One of the things you talk about your decision to set the book in Florida.
Can you talk about your decision to set the book in Florida, which is one of the questions I didn't have time for. So thank you.
Yes. Okay. So two things are coming to mind. I can't remember like what came first. One was that one of my very good friends / writer friends lives in Florida and like near Ocala. She's from there. And so she was like gonna be my personal reference that helped me like world build to that extent. But I think like the main there's three parts of this. The main reason was like Florida man like everything weird happens in Florida. Like the Florida Man is like, there's so many headlines that are like, Florida man like eats garbage dressed like a bumblebee. Like so many headlines of weird things happening in Florida. So I was like, that feels fun. Like Florida man becomes werewolf against his will, etc. In a musical. And the last thing about it was like I actually was interested in the idea of like terrible things are happening in Florida, but there are progressive people who are like fighting the good fight. And I want to be able to represent them in fiction as well as obviously like the louder narratives sometimes of people who are not behaving in ways that deserve love. I feel like there was also one more thing. Oh, my sister, who is a vet tech, lives in Florida. So it was a little bit of a love letter to her there too.
From Ruby Barrett.
Oh, is it why did you take all my ideas?
Two questions from her. One open to both of you. What does romance mean to you, both writing and reading it? And then your favorite clay class hero and least favorite clay class hero?
Okay. Do you want to say what romance means to you first?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that love is like kind of the closest thing that we have to magic that we can experience. And people are just like really weird and complicated. And the fact that we ever find anyone who is like weird and complicated in the same way, feels like magic and is very beautiful and feels like can just be endlessly explored in every possible way by whoever wants to do it. And that's what it means to me.
I like ditto. That was so good. But yeah, no, I do think like that anyone can find love is yeah, endless fodder for romance reading and writing, and my appetite for it is insatiable. The Kleypas heroes. So Lisa Kleypas, historical romance writer. If you're not into historical romance yet, I think Lisa is a good gateway for you. Maybe check her out. The best hero. Oh, the reason she said this is she wants me to say who I think is the worst because it's controversial. I my favorite, this is also not cool, like I don't think is a popular choice, is Marcus like Westcliff. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, that's my choice for my favorite. I know it's weird. He's from It Happened One Autumn, if you want to read his romance. But he's like the thing about Lisa Kleypas is she's like, you got to read 5 books to appreciate what happened to this character and their love story. Which I do. I love it, Lisa, but like I'm warning you. And then I think St. Vincent sucks, and that's sort of all I'll say about it. And
But
I'm
you love
sorry.
Spike.
I know. Okay, honestly, okay, I will say more, I guess. I don't think that his book does enough to redeem him. He's like bedridden. That's a spoiler. Damn it. It's been out for like 20 years. He's like bedridden for most of it. Like he's not Spike got a soul for Buffy. He got a soul for her, which means he was soulless when he decided to do that. That's so beautiful. Saint Vincent
That's
gets
yeah
redacted is what that's supposed to be what his grand gesture is. He gets redacted. Can't say it. It is a big spoiler. I'm trying not to. Anyway, I don't think it's satisfying. I'm sorry. Please still read my books and be my friend.
Wow, she's really trying to stir up some trouble for you. Okay, I think we have time for one more. Yes.
Is there a romance trope you never
Oh my gosh. Oh, is there a romance trope you never want to write?
I'm sure there is. Of course, like what immediately sprang to mind is like I would like to write all of these ones. Feels like a cop out to say Secret Baby. And honestly, like I would have more confidently said Secret Baby, but I read a fic, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. That was Secret Baby, and it was so friggin' good that I was like, "That's great trope, I guess." But I don't have any plans for that. I think that's really hard to pull off, and frankly, it works more in fic because again, it relied on like understanding of canon and like let the canon storytelling set up why this baby would be secret. So I can't imagine that would ever happen for me. So I will say that one.
Ooh.
What were for both of you? What were your celebrity crushes when you were growing up?
Oh my
What
God.
were your celebrity
Everyone,
crushes
yeah.
growing
Every
up?
Celebrity, no.
Oh, well, mine was Spike.
Oh
I know
yeah,
it's not he's not a celebrity. It was on the character, not the celebrity.
the man's not famous enough.
I guess my first celebrity crush was probably Angelina Jolie, like in
Oh
Tomb
yeah,
Raider.
Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Oh my God, beautiful.
Yeah.
And Angelina Jolie and Daniel Craig in Tomb Raider was like perfect. Like you are bisexual. Um, earlier than that, I loved Xena Warrior Princess. And I loved Xena and Ares. And again, it was that's one of the joys of being bisexual is you're like, I have a crush on both of you. So beautiful. So I'll go with again, it's not really a celebrity though, it's a character. I feel like I didn't answer it right. I
can't
don't
leave until you
I
answer
don't
it
anymore,
right.
but I liked Aaron Carter. I
That's
had
a
an
great
Aaron
one.
Carter
Yeah.
poster.
That definitely counts.
That wasn't yeah, that's not
It was cool at the
R.I.P.,
time.
right? I think he's dead.
Yeah.
Okay. R.I.P.
Well, thank you for coming.
Be honest.
No, I think that was correct for you to be honest, because otherwise you would be in trouble. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Yes. Can we get a huge round of applause? Yes, that was very entertaining. I also feel very safe now because I will never reveal what mine was, but it was worse than that. Okay, so I'm gonna very awkwardly, as everyone silently watches on, take a photo of you guys with with Rosie's book, and then we are going to not yet in a moment fold up our chairs, not yet, but in a moment, and just put them up to the side. Our lovely booksellers will get them situated and squared away. We are going to be continuing with our new sort of thing by having the signing line on this side, starting over where Marianne is. So you can follow her when we've gotten to that part of the program, guys. We're not there yet. And then, so if you want your book personalized,